You are officially invited. Yes, you. You're invited to join us in Fertility Awareness Mastery. This is my 10-week program designed to help you gain confidence using fertility awareness. Whether you're actively avoiding pregnancy or looking to optimize your cycles for conception, we have a spot for you. We start on April 23rd. Are you ready to jump in? Head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program to reserve your spot today. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. This episode is brought to you by my very first book, The Fifth Vital Sign: Master Your Cycles and Optimize Your Fertility. With over 1,000 research citations, it is the most comprehensive resource on fertility awareness and the menstrual cycle to date. The Fifth Vital Sign is available for purchase on Amazon in ebook and paperback formats. Audio is coming. And you can grab the first chapter for free over at fertilityfriday.com/vital sign. That's fertilityfriday.com/vital sign. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 252. Welcome to the 252nd episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm excited to share today's episode with you. Today I have another installment of my Fertility Awareness Reality series. And so in this series, I'm sharing on-air client calls. And so in these sessions, you get a window into what it would be like to work with me one-on-one. Now, for those of you who are newer to the podcast, if you've just discovered Fertility Friday, or even if you've been listening for a little while, welcome to the show. A little bit about me. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator, and I've been teaching women to chart their cycles for nearly 20 years. So that comes with a lot of experience, a lot of insights, and also over the years, I've worked with hundreds of women. So I've seen a number of trends and patterns, and these trends and patterns have really guided me to develop programs to support you to not only learn about fertility awareness, but to gain confidence using it specifically in your day-to-day lives. And so there are a couple specific things that you can expect when you join a program with me. At the end of the program, you can expect to feel confident in your ability to use fertility awareness effectively. And when I say confident, I mean to get that same level of effectiveness as you would get if you were on the pill or if you were using an IUD. And so, what the research shows us is that with perfect use, fertility awareness is up to 99.4% effective, meaning that less than one woman out of 100 women per year would get pregnant using the method correctly. And so, one of the biggest things that I'm passionate about, in addition to sharing the general information so that we can have an understanding of how our cycles work and how our bodies work, is to support women to actually use fertility awareness. So not all women want to use fertility awareness as their primary method of birth control, but many of us do. There's a certain percentage of us who really gravitate to this concept of understanding our bodies and our cycle and being able to avoid the pharmaceutical industry and have an equally effective method of birth control. And so to really just take the power and the control in our hands, I always kind of like that idea of being able to completely avoid the pharmaceutical industry as far as my fertility is concerned, and just being able to do that, to do it within myself. So something that I can learn once and then have for the rest of my life. And not just the idea of it, but actually have it work for me cycle after cycle, month after month, year after year. And so, nearly 20 years in, this will be coming up on my 18th year using fertility awareness. So, 18 years in, I've never had an accident. I've never had an unplanned pregnancy. I've never had a pregnancy scare. And that's because from the very start, I knew what I was doing. I knew what the rules were, and I followed those rules. And I support women to do the same thing. So, you can do it too. It's not magic. It's not, there's no big secret. It's just skills and strategies and knowledge and understanding and practice, all of those things. So those are things you can get within the program. In the 10-week program, I designed it over the course of about a 3-month period. So the 10 weeks takes us through 2.5 months together. And by the end of the program, that means we've gone through 3 cycles together. And so, this program is designed with you in mind to get you to the point that you can feel comfortable using this method so that you can expect to have the effectiveness level equal to what you would have if you were using a hormonal method or any other type of method that also comes with that 99% effectiveness rate, perfect use on the package. I want to invite you, if you're listening to this in real time, It's the first week of April in 2019, and at this stage, we still have a few spaces available in our live Fertility Awareness Mastery group program. If you're listening and this is resonating with you and you're kind of in that stage of like, I want to use it, but I'm not sure if it's going to work for me. I want to feel really confident. I still have questions about my mucus. I still have questions about my temperature. I don't know what this means. I don't know why my cycles are not, always the same every month. I don't know why they fluctuate. Then those are questions that you will have answers to by the time you get to the end of the program. You're going to feel so much better about this method and really have the tools to use it for the rest of your reproductive life. So for more information, head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program and join us. We will be starting on April 23rd, and we would love to have you in there with us. So fertilityfriday.com/group program. Now let's jump into today's episode with Devyn. I'm excited to be here today with Devyn. Devyn is a member of my 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery group program. And as we're recording this, we're actually pretty close to wrapping up our program together. I think next week we're heading into session 9, so that would be our second last session together. So we've been together for a little over 2 months now, and we've had lots of opportunity to connect and to review charts. And I'm really excited to have you here. So welcome to the show, Devyn.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. We were just chatting in our little pre-chat about how this is like a very public, private conversation. So it's just you and I, but we're sharing this conversation with everybody. So I know that not everybody is comfortable with that. And I really appreciate everybody who participates in this because it's such a great opportunity for the listeners to learn about charting and get kind of like the behind the scenes look into things. So I appreciate that. So before we jump into your charting questions and all of the wonderful, juicy, nitty-gritty things we'll chat about today, I would love to hear a little bit about your charting history and if you've ever used birth control before, what your kind of early periods were like, and what brought you to this stage where you're now, jumping into the charting course and using fertility awareness primarily.
Yeah, so I actually got my period around age 10. So I was very young and I was the first of my friends. And I remember actually when I first noticed the bleeding that I hid it for a few days because it wasn't a discussion me and my mom had ever had. And I was kind of freaked out. And then when I did finally talk to my mom about it, the first thing she said to me was, well, for the rest of your life, whenever you look forward to something or you have something planned, you can expect your period. So from the beginning, I really had this, negative view of my period and that it was really inconvenient. My mom, too, struggled with really heavy periods, so I witnessed that, as well as bad cramps. But that was kind of the beginning, but I didn't talk to my friends about it until a few years later when they started getting theirs, and then it was kind of more, normal. In the beginning, I don't remember having too bad of cramps or anything. I think it was around age 15, 16. Then I got bad cramps, and I remember laying on the floor with a heat bag, just like writhing in pain, taking Advil. It never got to the point where I missed school or anything like that, but I do remember like stopping what I was doing, breathing, and then moving on. So around, I think 15, 16 is when I actually went on the birth control pill, and that was to regulate my cycle and to help with my pain with the cramping. So that was fine at first. I was actually pretty good about taking my pills on time. And then around 18, 19, I was heading into university and I started getting really bad headaches and migraines. And it could have been stress, but a lot of it I do think came back to the birth control pill. So I saw my doctors about it. They decided that I should go and try the depot shot. So I tried that, just the one dose, and for 4 months I either bled or spotted. Yeah. So yeah, that was a horrible time. And I mean, I just started university, so I had enough things going on aside from dealing with that. And I do remember though, like with the depot, like the biggest thing that I was concerned about was my bone density. I do remember hearing about that and being like, well, it won't take forever, but that stood out to me. But the spotting, like I remember going to my doctor and crying and then being like, well, we can't really do anything about this. You got to wait it out. So after that, I went back on a new pill because the Depo didn't work. And that was okay for, I think, a few years until I started spotting most of my cycle. So that was driving me crazy. And then I don't know if it was a doctor who had said it, but I had heard that as you get older, like approaching 25-ish, you need a higher dose of hormones. So we upped the hormone level. That was fine until I would go on the break days, like the 7 days without the pill, and my hormones would just drop. And I described myself as a crazy person. I would cry, me and my fiance would fight, and we didn't do that. So that's kind of really when I realized like something was wrong. And I remember him asking me to, and being like, you don't seem yourself, you don't seem happy anymore. And I just remember crying and saying, I'm not. So then I was kind of trying the 3 months of pills straight, 1 week off. And it helped a little bit, but I was sad all the time. So then I decided, well, maybe I should look into an IUD, but fully knowing that not really doing well with anything else, it probably wouldn't work either, but I just felt like I had no other option. Oddly enough, my fiance was driving home from our hometown. It's a 6-hour drive, and was just listening to some random podcasts on Spotify. Came across a podcast that you, Lisa, had been on, and he said he was bored, so he listened to it. And I remember him coming home and being like, you have to hear this. And so that night I listened, and I just couldn't believe that there was this world of knowledge I had no idea about. Then I started looking into it. I listened to more podcasts. I bought Taking Charge of Your Fertility, just kind of fully submerged myself in it. I didn't go off the pill for a few months, though, because I really wanted to make sure that it would be a good option. But just, having him find the podcast really did change my life.
Wow.
And that's kind of brought me here.
That gave me goosebumps because when you were telling your story, you were really at that stage. I think a lot of women, because some women don't report the side effects where, it affects everybody, but not everyone feels the same way. Mm-hmm. But I've heard that story many times where you just, you know that it's not working for you. Mm-hmm. And it's causing you, the emotional side effects are like the worst, like feeling depressed and all that kind of stuff. But then also what you said, I felt like I didn't have any other option. Here I've tried all of the hormones. Now we can try the IUD, and not sure if that's going to work. So it felt like it, when you described it, it was like right at this perfect time. And it's really interesting because you're not the first person who it's, their partner was the one to lead them to this non-hormonal method. And it just made me think, at the time that we're recording, there's a really interesting discussion going on in my Facebook group about just, what would be an appropriate method for teens, and should teens use hormones, and what about condoms, and, all of this kind of stuff. And a lot of women are really afraid that their partners wouldn't be open to modifying their behavior around sex. But when I hear stories like yours, it just reinforces what I've found, which is that your partner wants you to be happy and healthy, and that's their primary concern for the most part.
Definitely. And I think opening up that discussion too is huge, and it's brought me and my partner so much closer. But it's funny that you mentioned about the teenagers, because I'm actually a registered nurse, and during a rotation in public health, I remember teaching these girls, download this app. It'll remind you to take your pill every day. And I was so proud of that. And then just looking back, it's like, wow, that could have been such a great opportunity for some of these young girls to be introduced to other options.
Yeah, it's hard. It's, especially as a public health nurse, you're not necessarily at liberty to be. And I remember I had a conversation with Dr. Miranda Naylor, and I can link that episode. And, I asked her about just how it was. And, obviously she's talking about all the options, including hormonal options. And she said, she's like, I'm a different kind of doctor. I'm actually sharing all the options. So I would also talk about the fertility awareness method. And she's like, often the women come to my office. we're smart ladies. We already know what we want by the time we're in there. So you share all the options, and fertility awareness or, other types of options. And I'm pretty sure you already know that some of the ladies that you would see would be like, that's nice. I just need my pills.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is nice to have somebody plant the seed, because at some point that girl may remember, that woman did say something about these other methods. Let me do a Google search.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think back to when I was that age, like what would I have done? But I think going through all the difficulties with the different pills and depot and stuff, it just would have been nice, I guess, to know that at least there was something.
Yeah. Well, and you reminded me, you shared about your experience with depot and having the side effect of bleeding all the time. So, I mean, obviously not every woman has that, but there's a percentage of women who do bleed all the time after the shot. And when you get the shot, it is a shot of hormones in your body. You can do nothing until it wears off.
Yeah. And I was told that it lasted for 3 months, right? But then I got that extra month of spotting too.
Well, and it makes sense if you think about it, because they have to make it so that it doesn't wear off before the 3-month mark. So it would make sense that, yeah, exactly. Well, and so share with us just a little bit about how the transition has been for you. Were you afraid of getting pregnant, right off the bat when you came off the pill? And if so, which is pretty common, pretty standard, how have you managed that fear so far?
So yeah, I remember taking my last pill, but I was scared, but it was so liberating. I just felt like there was such a weight coming off my shoulders, and I really didn't know what was going to happen, but it just felt so good to be doing something so much better for my body. And having my fiance's support too was incredible, and him being willing to do whatever we needed to do to avoid pregnancy and just continue on this new journey. So we have used condoms during our fertile window. But in the beginning, I remember, don't look at me, don't touch me. I could be fertile right now. I'm freaked out. This isn't happening. But now it's been almost a year since I've been off the pill. And now, especially doing the course with you, I've learned so much more, and I am more comfortable in the post-ovulation stage. But yeah, it's a huge step. But I just really immersed myself in the literature and the podcasts and just always learning. But I mean, if there's any doubt, we have no issue using protection, because getting pregnant right now just isn't something we want to do.
Yeah. Well, and just to kind of normalize, we talk about this in the group, but with fertility awareness, it's not the same as getting a shot of depot. So when you get the shot of depot, it starts working immediately. I'm sure there's a little latency period, but you know what I mean. And with fertility awareness, it's a process. It's something that you learn. It's a skill that you develop. And so it's also an experiential learning. So, each cycle that you chart, you learn something. And each cycle that you use the method actively, you gain that much more confidence. So it sounds to me that you kind of put your toes in the pool. You started learning about it before you're ready to come off. Okay. And then also easing into it, having that backup plan, having to have that discussion, because, your sex life had to change for a while you made this transition. And it's always going to be different than it was before. Yeah. And it's interesting because I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, so we're going to pull this back. But it's interesting because it's often kind of assumed that it's going to be worse, because it means it's not going to, it's not going to be as spontaneous and all that kind of stuff. And I find that all to be really interesting. I've been married for a long time now, and I've listened to a lot of different books about marriage, and it's like, you think that it's spontaneous, but if you remember back in the beginning when you were first doing it with your partner, I'm pretty sure there was a whole lot more planning than we've ever thought about. Making, planning dates.
Yeah, that's true.
All the things, yeah. So we always think it's so spontaneous, but if you really think about it, especially thinking back to the beginning stages of the relationship, I mean, there's a lot more planning around the sex at that time. So anyways, just a side note, just to kind of put that out there.
No, totally. And now it's kind of just at the point where he'll be like, are you fertile? And I'll be like, yes or no. And then you just kind of move on from that.
Yes. So it's different. But hey, I mean, a lot of women get their libido back. So this isn't all bad. That can be.
Yeah.
All right. So now let's jump into our session. So we've had a few sessions together. yeah, quite a few. So I have a good sense of what's going on, but I just want a sense from you of what you wanted to make sure that we focused on today.
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest thing I'm tackling right now is painful period cramping. Now that I'm off the pill again, it's funny though. It's not bad every single month, but this past period, I did have quite bad pain. I woke up at 3 a.m. and writhed around in bed for a few hours with a heat bag and just, yeah, and like not even the heaviest of flow. I really don't know why it woke me up. I don't know why I had to have so much pain, but I'm really trying to wrap my head around the fact that that's not normal and just moving forward with trying to find ways to reduce that pain or manage it. So with your guidance through the course, I've started taking zinc 5 days leading up to my period. I actually saw an Arvigo massage therapist, which was really cool. I'm looking forward actually to my next luteal phase so I can try castor oil packs. So I'm really just trying to embrace all these alternative options. And some days I feel like I'm really just taking on too much, but I mean, with charting, you can only kind of do one day at a time anyway. So I'm just trying to be kind to myself and being like, well, if you're going to do this today, that's okay. And if you miss it tomorrow, it's okay. But just trying to find little things that can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when you first started having periods, were they painful back then as well?
I don't remember in the first few years, but I definitely remember like 14, 15, like in high school, I remember them being really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose it just remains to be seen when you start implementing changes. You should see some improvement if you're hitting the right things. And so we talked a little bit about just, painful periods and how they're associated with inflammation and some of the ways that we can naturally improve that on our own, which is looking at the dietary stuff, looking at sugar as inflammatory and all of the refined carbohydrates, looking at adding in anti-inflammatory agents, eating more fish, adding in fish oil. Magnesium and zinc have anti-inflammatory properties, so looking at those. And of course, between all of that and the Arvigo, and so I think what will be, is it with your previous cycle, I think you started a lot of these interventions
right before this last cycle, yeah.
Yes.
That's when I started taking the zinc, and the Arvigo was only a week and a bit ago. So yeah, a lot of it is really new, so we'll see how.
Yeah, because it's a bit different when you approach painful periods this way. It's not the same as an Advil. So Advil, first of all, doesn't always work. But when you take it in the window and you take enough, then it typically does work right away. But it's different because it's addressing something in a very specific way. And then after that 6 hours, it wears off and then you have to take it again. Whereas addressing the inflammation kind of across the board, targeting it in these different ways, it's really different because what you find, and I can speak to this from experience and also from the women who I've worked with, personally having horrible periods, but also working with clients, is that it's different when you address it globally, reducing inflammation, because it's almost like it takes the whole thing down a notch. Whereas when you take an Advil, I'm not saying anything negatively about Advil. I don't think women should have to suffer, so just to be clear on that. But when you take an Advil, it's different because it quite literally very temporarily reduces the pain, and that pain comes back. Whereas when you do it this way, when you're able to kind of lower that overall, the whole period goes down in terms of the pain. So it doesn't always go away completely, but I suppose we're all just waiting on the edge of our seats to see what your next period is like.
Yeah, me too. I never thought I would be looking forward to my period. Here I am.
I have this chart. Actually, yeah, this is fairly recent. So for the listeners who cannot see your chart, Devyn has a paper chart that she's filled out, and we have most of it. There's just a couple of days. So you mentioned that you're kind of still in your pre-ovulatory phase.
My temperature went up this morning, and I have had a few days of lubricative egg white mucus. So.
Okay. So, all right. Yeah. So I'm on the chart that I'm looking at. There's like 3 days missing. So I've got most of it. So yeah. So that means that after we go see tomorrow and the next day, we'll have a good sense if we're in the luteal phase, and then you'll have an opportunity to continue on.
Mhm.
And so how has it been with charting? I see in this cycle here, you just compare it to the previous one. Yeah, it still looks fairly consistent, and there's a clear difference between your pre-ovulatory dry days and then what you actually see as you get closer to ovulation.
Mhm.
And so how do you feel at this stage with the method? We've had a lot of conversations about the fertile window, how to manage it, which you are already doing, and also just getting comfortable with using the method. So how do you feel in terms of all of those things at this stage?
Overall, I feel like I'm getting way more confident. The course has really helped with that. But yeah, just I'm not a patient person. So like actually charting and like starting to see some kind of trends and stuff has been really nice for me. But yeah, it's become a habit. Like the temperature, I'm really good at doing. The mucus, for the most part, I'm pretty good. There's some days at work where I'm just rushed and it's just like, oh, I didn't check, but that's okay. And you kind of move on. But again, it's just being kind with myself and just being a human and doing the best I can. But yeah, if I would have thought that I would be in this place, like from a few years ago, I would have said no, but it's amazing just getting in touch with my body and then just learning all these little things I can try.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I live in the real world. We talk about this a lot in the group. So there's no such thing as a perfect chart. There's never going to be a chart where you never miss one observation. I mean, maybe, but for the majority of us, there might be one time where you have that staff meeting or whatever, and you just have to run and etc. But forming that habit, and as you said, being gentle with yourself and literally just moving on and doing it the next time is the way to go for that. And what's interesting is we're really hard on ourselves. So if the listeners could see your chart, they would see that you are really consistent and you are making your observations on a daily basis and noting it. And I'm guessing that even if you had one of those imperfect days, it's still, so you mentioned that prior to ovulation, you did notice that feeling of lubrication and you did have some clear stretchy mucus. So I'm guessing that even if you were trying to not see that, you couldn't anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then also I noticed a couple of days, like, so checking your cervical position. How has that been going? So it's optional, but I'm just checking in. There's no pressure. You don't have to check it.
Yeah, I've checked it a few times if I think about it. Some days I'm like, I have no idea what I'm feeling for. And then I think a few times I'm like, okay, I think I'm getting it. But I have not been consistent enough. But yeah, it's a bit interesting. It's not something that I ever imagined myself doing, that's for sure. And it's funny too, like being a nurse, like, I mean, I've seen some things, but like trying to get in touch with my own stuff, I'm like, whoa, crossing a line, but.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's when you're doing for other people, it's completely different and it's pretty personal and it's not something, I feel like I've talked a lot about the cervix in the last couple weeks. In our class, I shared the Beautiful Cervix Project. So if any of the listeners have never heard of that, I don't know, maybe I'll send a flood of people to that website. They'll be like, what's going on? But if you've never heard of it, or if you've never seen your own cervix, or if you don't know what a cervix looks like, or if you're just like, what is a cervix? Going to the Beautiful Cervix website is interesting. So that website has been around for a really long time. I remember that website back when I was learning the method, like almost 20 years. I'm pretty sure I'm not making this up because I remember that website from a long time ago. And basically it's just sharing images of the cervix at different points in the cycle, as well as different situations that can happen. So for instance, cervical ectropion is special kind of condition where inner cells of the cervix develop on the outside. So if you look at the cervix, it almost looks like it has a little rash. That's just an example of one of the things that you can see. And also, I've had a number of clients who take it upon themselves to grab, buy a speculum, which you can do on Amazon. I really need to buy one because they keep talking about this. And every time I'm like, I need to check my own cervix. I've never done this before. I don't think I've seen my cervix, and that has to change, especially after I say it on air. So maybe a speculum is in my future. But anyways, I've had a number of clients who have opted to do that. And again, this is optional. This is not something that I recognize not everyone even wants to do. But what's interesting about the cervix is that we never see it. It's almost like this foreign concept. We never really touch it unless you're fully into fertility awareness and you learn about the changes. When you touch it, you're feeling an internal organ, so you don't really know what you're feeling. Mm-hmm. So some of my clients who have taken it upon themselves to actually get a speculum, insert it into their vagina, open it up, and use a mirror to take a look at their cervix, it makes so much more sense because they can kind of see what's going on. So we all don't need to get... Sorry?
I was just going to say, I think that would help a lot, actually, seeing...
Well, considering you're a nurse, now I have a stereotype about nurses because I'm from Alberta, and a lot of my friends are, and you're Canadian as well. Mm-hmm. So, but a lot of my friends are nurses. I have so many friends that are nurses. And I mean, I'm pretty open and I talk about bodily fluids all the time. But when I'm hanging around with nurses, they talk about, well, you're a nurse. Mm-hmm. There's no filter and all of the disgusting things all of the time because you've seen everything.
Yeah.
So you see where I'm going with this. If you want to, you're the audience for it because you've already seen it all.
Yeah. I know. It wouldn't be that different seeing my own. Maybe need a speculum too.
Yeah, but that aside, in your case, one of the challenges that we have been talking about is that although you do see a clear shift to cervical mucus as you approach ovulation, you're not necessarily seeing as many days of it. So it seems like this cycle you did have a couple more days though. Or did you? This is the last cycle that I have up here, and then this is, I don't know how many days you had this cycle.
This one, on day 5 of mucus. Yeah, day 5. But I kind of have it charted, though, as smooth G6, and then lubricative 10K, and then the next day, I didn't see any, but I wasn't the best at checking, so maybe I just missed it because with my egg white mucus, I have noticed I'm only seeing it once a day. Okay. So maybe I've just kind of missed that, but I'm just charting it kind of as what I've seen. So it's kind of like mucus, not seeing anything, mucus, not seeing anything. Mm-hmm. But I kind of feel like I'm just missing that observation just because I haven't been checking as frequently as I should be. But yeah, it kind of made me wonder though if maybe I'm not seeing, or if I just don't have, I guess, as much mucus as I maybe thought I did.
Yeah. Well, I would say, are you checking, or have you noticed that you see it if you check post bowel movement or post?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because typically for my clients who aren't seeing it or seeing it once or twice a day, usually it helps it along.
Yeah.
So I would just, pay closer attention around there. It's always when we're ovulating that things kind of go haywire.
When the exciting things happen.
Yeah. So the other thing is that, and I think we spoke about this a little bit in the group, to change our expectations. I was speaking to one of my past clients actually earlier this week, and she mentioned that when we first learned about mucus, she expected to see it every day. So she was like, okay, I've got my toilet paper. Here we go, right? I'm going to see this stuff all the time. And so when you actually start charting, especially with the way that, I teach it in the group, and then we're checking externally with toilet paper, what you should see in a healthy cycle is that it actually should be dry most of the time. So out of 29 days of a menstrual cycle, you would expect it to be dry probably 20 of those days. It's a lot of dry. And then you would expect to see mucus between 2 and 7 days.
Yeah.
And then you have your period for a period of time. So then that's part of it. And then when you actually see it, there was one study that I looked at where they actually quantified how much mucus there was, and I was really curious about it, but it was literally like a quarter of a teaspoon to half a teaspoon a day.
Wow.
During the fertile window. So so that was, I thought that was a really interesting measure. So a couple things, I mean, in terms of using the method for birth control when you're not seeing as much, that's why I brought up the cervix and we had the whole cervix conversation. So you're kind of going through the stages, and the first stage was just to get the handle on the charting. So that was kind of like the first chart. And then now you're easing into post-ovulatory phase and getting comfortable with that. And so as you become more comfortable with the post-ovulatory phase and confirming ovulation, at some point you and your partner may want to put the pre-ovulatory phase on the table. So it's stages. And when that happens, then you may feel a lot more comfortable and confident at that stage to bring in the cervical position checks, especially if we're still just seeing a couple days of mucus, because it doesn't matter if you see it once a day. Pregnancy is possible in any cycle that you ovulate. And in terms of your chances of trying to get pregnant, it's really important to it's like the golden rule. There's no such thing as more fertile or less fertile. It's just fertile. And it doesn't matter if you just see it once. That once is enough to, and some women don't actually see any mucus that they can stretch. Some women just have that sensation of lubrication. And I've worked with clients who only have that, and they get pregnant from just that.
Well, it's interesting, like in the last few days, like not noting some on some days, because it's kind of like, okay, you really do need to be on it, especially around the fertile time. And
I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about cervical health in our hot seats together, so we kind of have a sense of why there's not necessarily as much. But even if everything was optimal and great, we would still be looking at seeing it maybe at like one day of the cycle where you'd expect to see it 3 or 4 times. But just to kind of put it out there, because I've seen the range. I've seen women who do have, several days of peak mucus 4 or more times a day, but it's not the norm, especially as we get into our 30s. It's pretty common to have a couple of days where you just see it once or twice.
Yeah, that helps.
But I would say that especially when the special instructions, I suppose, for you. So next, this is kind of like we're already past ovulation now. So for your next chart, the next thing to think about would just be to think about the cervix. Check it a couple times now that you've ovulated so that you get a feel of the post-ovulatory cervix. It'll be pretty boring, obviously, but you'll get a clear sense of how it feels. And then in your next cycle, and this is only if you want to, but I think you might. At some point, if you ever want to move into the pre-ovulatory, then this would be helpful. And then at that stage, if you do decide, so whether it's next cycle in the future, or never, but if you do decide, then just, once your period's tapering off, just check every day until you confirm ovulation. And then you'll get a sense of how your cervix changes. So then you have more than one sign to alert you that you're moving into your fertile window.
Right.
So we've talked about a little bit about period pain, a little bit about charting. Was there any other topics that you wanted to make sure we focused on?
I don't think so. I think that pretty much covers where I'm at. As you know from our private consults, I don't ever really have a dry day, but I've started taking folate for that. So I guess just for the listeners, when I wipe, there's always a little bit of dampness or wetness, and that's before peeing or anything like that. So that indicates cervical health. So we've looked at that. So I feel like there's been a lot of things I'm trying to address at once, I guess, but it's just a slow going process, but I'm excited to see where it goes.
Well, at this stage, we're kind of at the beginning of a journey, even though we're almost at the end of a journey, but really and truly, we're at the beginning of a journey. And so I suppose it's one of those situations where you can, if you feel comfortable, you kind of have to take my word for it, in the sense of, if you give, whenever you're implementing new things, whatever it is, it's a good idea to think about it in cycles of 3. Mm-hmm. And so really thinking, and I totally get it, because we live in a world where, I was looking on Amazon today for shoes, and like when I was, you know what I mean? Like, you just order the shoe and I can get like my size. I'm a 9.5. You know how hard it is to find the size 9.5 shoe, but I can just go online and order it, and then it's at my house in a day or 2. Mm-hmm. So we really are used to having everything we want right away, and health stuff is a bit different. It's hard to be patient, especially when you're in the midst of it, but it's what you said. You just take it one day at a time. Yeah. But give yourself, I think it's helpful sometimes to give yourself literally a day, and you can put it on your calendar. So today, as we're recording this, it's mid-March. Yeah. And so if you were to literally give yourself 3 months from now, so April, May, June 15th or something, put that on your calendar and try to file it. You'll of course think about it, and you'll of course be looking at the day-to-day changes, but in some way try to kind of file the big conclusion until June 15th or June 30th or whatever the case is. And then once you get there, make yourself a little 20-minute appointment and pull out your previous charts and really just take a look at all of them. That is what I do when I'm fortunate enough to work with someone for 3 to 4 months, which is why my programs tend to be about that long, because that is how you actually see really what you've done. On a day-to-day basis, it doesn't seem like anything has changed ever.
Yeah. And not being a patient person, I'm just like, okay.
Yeah. But that's the benefit of someone like me. 20 years in, so I have one chart has a lot less weight for me because I know, you're going to be charting next year this time, and that would give you 12 charts to look at. And, so I'm in it for the long game, and I just try to impart that perspective. So you just have to take my word for it.
Yeah, I will, and that's great advice. I'll write that in my agenda.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I know the listeners love these episodes because it gives this really awesome window into fertility awareness charting and what it's like to work with someone to help you go through your charts. So if, for the woman who's listening, who is in the midst of her own birth control journey, so whether she has been on birth control and she literally just stumbled upon this podcast today, or whether she is kind of thinking about fertility awareness and in the stage that you were, where you were kind of reading up and all of that, what advice would you want to give her?
I guess my advice really is just, if you think it's something that you're interested in, that you want to try for yourself and your health, just go for it. Dip your toes in, start slow, and as I've said about myself a few times today, just be kind to yourself and just keep learning and trying. And if you can work with an instructor, it really does make a world of difference. But it's really empowering to do this for yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've taken away from all of it. Is just, for me, really taking that time and that effort to learn my body. So I think just go for it. Dip your toes in.
Awesome. Well, and for the listener who is hearing about this class and wondering, should I jump in? Should I take the plunge? Maybe share with us what has shifted for you. So from when you first started to now, and, what advice you'd have for someone who's thinking about jumping in.
I think the best part about being in the group setting is that even though all of us girls are in mostly different places in our lives and our cycles and all that kind of stuff, there's just underlying themes that you're all kind of going through things, or you have gone through things, and there's so much support for one another. And you're always learning, whether you're in that position of like maybe trying to conceive or avoiding, and somebody else is in that same boat, just learning together and supporting. But even if I had done a lot of reading, but you still learn so much, and it's really is a lifelong learning experience, I think.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Devyn. Thank you for being here and for sharing your story and inspiring women to know you can do this.
Thank you so much for having me. It meant a lot to me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/252. That's fertilityfriday.com/252.
I hope that you enjoyed my interview with Devyn. It was such a treat to have her on the show, and of course, to have her in the Fertility Awareness Mastery Group program. And one of my favorite things about doing these on-air sessions is that it gives me an additional opportunity to connect with my clients in the program, but it allows me to hear different parts of their story. And so even though within the program, we have talked about birth control history and menstrual cycle history, and we've gotten into a ton of detail about, the menstrual cycle health and how it connects to what we're seeing on the chart. Whenever I do these sessions, different parts of the story always come out. I think that's because whenever I'm interviewing anybody, I have the opportunity to just ask a bunch of questions and to kind of follow up. So if there's something I want to explore further and learn more about, if there's a certain part of someone's story that I want to hear more of and more details of, I have the option to do that within the interview. And so I know that you appreciate that because most of my clients attest that these are their favorite episodes. But, in addition to all of that, what I really appreciate about the on-air client sessions is that it demystifies the process of learning fertility awareness so that you can really see what it's like to work with me one-on-one to give you kind of like that bird's eye view, like that insight into what the sessions look like, what the program looks like, and what you really get out of it. And essentially, it allows you to see, what is it? What do these fertility awareness educators do? What type of knowledge do they have, and how can that support me in my journey and my fertility? When you join Fertility Awareness Mastery Live, my 10-week group coaching program, here's what you can expect. You can expect to learn in great detail and just to solidify your understanding of all of the main fertile signs. Whatever knowledge you came in with regarding cervical mucus, you're going to leave being able to master it. You're going to know exactly what's happening on every single day and all the different types of mucus that could possibly, I always say all the different types of mucus that could possibly come out of your vagina, but also what it means. You'll learn about cervical health. You'll learn how to identify what's normal in the menstrual cycle, how to know what's abnormal and where you fall in that. And that's really important and helpful information. You'll know the method itself. You'll be able to identify your fertile window, know exactly which days of your cycle are fertile, which days are not, so that you can use the method accurately and correctly throughout your entire reproductive life. And that includes times when your cycle is not necessarily regular. So you'll have the tools to roll with the punches, so to speak. As we approach menopause, our cycles tend to change, and often they become shorter or longer, depending on where we are. As we approach the end of our reproductive ages, as we approach the end of our reproductive years, and you'll have the tools to manage that. In order to use this method effectively, it does not require you to have perfectly, the same cycles all the time, and you'll gain the tools to confidently use fertility awareness. You'll understand how to use it correctly in the fertile window and gain that confidence to do so if you're ready, as well as throughout your cycle. And in addition to that, you'll gain the tools to improve your menstrual cycle health, improve your fertility, improve your hormonal health, and very specific tools and strategies to do so, but also learn how you can actually use your menstrual cycle, monitor your menstrual cycle as a feedback tool so that you always know where you are. Your cycle is always reflecting back to you your overall health. And so I teach you how to interpret that and understand that. And this is a skill you will have for the rest of your life. So it's hard for me to put into words sometimes what the program does, because essentially when I created this program, I was trying to create my experience of all these years of charting and learning about the connection between the menstrual cycle. I was trying to kind of create that experience for somebody. So instead of having to experience 20 years of charting and figuring all this stuff out on your own, to kind of truncate that into a 10-week program so that you can really leave with what I've had the opportunity to experience over the course of my adult life. So, I want to invite you to join us. We're starting in 2 weeks. If you're listening in real time, we're starting 2 weeks from now, April 23rd, 2019. And we want to have you in there. We know you're ready to jump into fertility awareness, or you wouldn't have listened this far into the episode. And so come and join us. You'll love the program. For more information, head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. If you have specific questions about the program that aren't answered on that page, you can email me, info@fertilityfriday.com. But either way, this is your opportunity to jump in. The next time this program is going to run isn't going to be for a little while, so I don't plan to run another program before September or October. So really, if this is something that you're wanting to jump into in 2019, this would be the time to do it. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/group program. Now, with that said, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today and for tuning in and listening to the show. I want to thank all of you for spreading the word and sharing the show with your friends. For all of you who've been spreading the word about my new book, The Fifth Vital Sign, and sharing it with your friends and helping me to shout it from the rooftops. Essentially, with The Fifth Vital Sign, I wanted to create that resource. So not only can you have that understanding about your menstrual cycle, but now you can have this as a resource to refer to, heavily cited, so that not only do you have that information, but you know where it comes from. So for those of you, and I know there's a lot of you who really want to delve into the research yourself and, learn more about it, because again, filling in those gaps, we're not taught this in our school system. So we're the ones that have to really educate ourselves. So for those of you who appreciate that, I do appreciate all of you for running out and grabbing your copy of The Fifth Vital Sign, as well as sharing that knowledge with your friends and spreading the word about fertility awareness, about The Fifth Vital Sign, so that we can just fill those gaps. At the end of the day, I'm not going to wait around for our education system to teach us. We're the ones that have to jump in and do it for ourselves. I feel like that much is obvious. That is clear. And so thank you for being on this incredible journey with me, and for supporting the show, and of course for spreading the word about fertility awareness. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.